This is Honors Geometry Lesson 7.2, Converse of the Pythagorean Theorem. So the Pythagorean theorem states that if you square the legs of a right triangle and find the sum, it's going to be equal to the square of the hypotenuse. The converse is also true. If the square of the length of the longest side, we're calling it the longest side because we don't know it's a right triangle yet, of a triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the lengths of the two other sides, then we know the triangle is a right triangle. In other words, if we do the Pythagorean theorem and it works, we know we have a right triangle. What happens if it doesn't work? We have two options. One is that the hypotenuse, or the longest side, is less than. If the hypotenuse is too small, then we know we have an acute triangle. If we do the Pythagorean theorem and the hypotenuse, the longest side, is too big, it's greater than, then we know we have an obtuse triangle. So let's practice. Here's a cute little chart. Again, it's just a quick summary. It says if you do the Pythagorean theorem and it equals, you know it's a right triangle. If the hypotenuse is less than, if it's too small, you know you have an acute triangle. If the hypotenuse turns out too big, or the largest side, then you know you have an obtuse triangle. All right, the first couple are simply yes, no. So you want your largest side to be your possible C, and your other two sides are going to be your A and B. So we have 9 squared plus 13 squared. Does that equal 13 root 2 quantity squared? So we have 81 plus 169. Does that equal? And when you multiply 13 root 2 times 13 root 2, you know you multiply the outsides, you multiply the insides, and you simplify the insides if you can. So 13 times 13 is 169. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4. So 169 times 2, or 169 times 2 would give us 338. And 169 plus 81 gives us 250. Equals 338. That obviously doesn't work. So the first question is simply, is this a right triangle? Our answer is no, it's not. Let's try it again. So we have, let me make some room here. We're going to start with our two smaller sides. We have 7 squared plus 11 squared. Does that equal 170? Oops, the square root of 170 quantity squared. And so that's 49 plus 121. Does that equal, if you take the square root of 170 times the square root of 170, that's sort of like adding 2 and subtracting 2, or multiplying by 2 and dividing by 2. They're inverse operations, so they're really going to cancel each other out. So we're just left with 170. And so 121 plus 49 gives us 170. So in this case, we have 170 equals 170. So the answer is yes, this one is a right triangle because the Pythagorean theorem works. Let's look at the other circumstance. They want more information. Now it's not just, is this a right triangle, but what kind of triangle do you have? So here we go again. 10 squared plus 11 squared. Our largest side, that's our potential hypotenuse. So we have 100 plus 121. Does that equal 14 squared, which is 196? And obviously that doesn't. 221 does not equal 196. So it's not a right triangle, but then the question is, what is it? Okay, so you look at the hypotenuse. That's the best way to do it. My hypotenuse, my potential hypotenuse, turned out too small. If it's too small, that means we have an acute triangle. Just look at that hypotenuse. Here we go again. We have 10 squared plus 15 squared. Does that equal 5 root 13 quantity squared? So that gives us 100 plus 225. Does that equal 5 root 13 times 5 root 13? 5 times 5 is 25. When you square a square root, that cancels it out, so that's going to give us back to 13. 25 times 13 gives us 325. So in this case, 325 equals 325. That's obviously a right triangle. And one more. Here we go again. So we have 24 squared plus 30 squared. Does that equal 6 root 43? And we want quantity squared. We have to square the 6 and the square root of 43. 24 squared plus 30 squared gives us 1,476. And 6 root 43, that gives us 36 when we square the 6. And then we square the square root, that cancels out, so that gives us 43. 36 times 43 gives us 1548 equals 1476. Again, we're looking at that hypotenuse. That's our answer. So our hypotenuse here, our potential hypotenuse, is too big. If it's too big, that means we have an obtuse triangle. So to sum up, look at the C. If the C is too small, it's acute. If the C equals it, it's right. If the C is too big, then you know you have an obtuse triangle. Please try the practice problems. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.